Picture two young girls playing in their backyard. Their laughter echoes through the neighborhood as they chase butterflies and dream about their future. But behind closed doors, a darkness lurks, one that would soon steal their childhood and change their lives forever. This isn't just another tragic story. This is about how a mother's addiction led her to make an unthinkable choice, trading her daughter's innocence for $200 worth of drugs. I've covered hundreds of true crime cases, but this one shakes me to my core. Not just because of what these girls went through, but because of how the system failed them time and time again. And trust me, what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about a mother's love. Jennifer Winters grew up in the small town of Cedar Grove, Tennessee. Life wasn't easy. Her family struggled to make ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck in a rundown trailer park on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where dreams go to die and hope feels like a luxury no one can afford. By age 16, Jennifer was already familiar with the harsh realities of life. Her father had left when she was young, and her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. The empty spaces in their lives were filled with struggle, and Jennifer learned early that survival sometimes meant making hard choices. She wasn't a bad kid. Teachers remembered her as quiet but bright, with a talent for art that could have taken her somewhere. But Cedar Grove wasn't the kind of place that nurtured dreams. It was the kind of place that crushed them, slowly and surely, until you forgot you ever had them in the first place. When Jennifer turned 18, she thought she'd found her escape. Thomas Bailey walked into the diner where she worked, all charm and promises. He talked about leaving town, starting fresh somewhere new. For a girl who'd never seen beyond county lines, his words were like magic. They got married 6 months later. Jennifer was pregnant within the year. Madison came first, a beautiful baby girl with her mother's green eyes and a smile that could light up a room. 2 years later, Emma joined the family. The girls were as different as sisters could be. Madison was thoughtful and quiet, while Emma bubbled with energy and mischief. For a while, it seemed like Jennifer had beaten the odds. She had her little family, a small apartment above the local hardware store, and dreams of giving her girls everything she never had. But life has a way of coming full circle, especially in places like Cedar Grove. Thomas started drinking. Not the casual beer after work kind of drinking, but the kind that turns men mean. The kind that makes fists clench and voices raise. The kind that makes promises break and dreams shatter. Jennifer tried to shield her girls from it. But how do you hide the sound of breaking glass? How do you explain away the bruises? How do you tell 2 little girls that daddy loves them when he can't even remember their names through the haze of alcohol? The breaking point came on Madison's 6th birthday. Thomas showed up drunk to her party, started a fight with one of the other parents, and ended up in jail. Jennifer packed up the girls that night, moved them into a cheap rental on the other side of town, and tried to start over. But starting over isn't easy when you're a single mom with 2 kids and barely a high school education. The job she could get barely covered rent and utilities. The girls needed clothes, school supplies, food. The pressure built day by day, bill by bill, until Jennifer felt like she was drowning. That's when she met Rachel at the gas station where she worked nights. Rachel noticed how tired Jennifer looked, how her hands shook when counting change. "I've got something that can help," Rachel said one night, just to take the edge off. The first time was free. The second time cost $20. By the third time, Jennifer was hooked. The pills made everything easier. The long hours, the constant worry, the gnawing guilt of not being able to give her girls a better life. But pills aren't cheap, and Jennifer's salary couldn't keep up with her growing need. She started taking extra shifts, pawning whatever she could. The girls' clothes came from donation bins, their meals from the food bank. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough when addiction takes hold. The girls noticed the changes in their mother, the way she'd be full of energy one day and barely able to move the next, how food disappeared from the fridge, but bills piled up unpaid, how strange people started showing up at their house at all hours. Madison, now 8, took on the role of protector. She made sure Emma 8 got to school on time, did her homework. She learned to recognize the signs of when mom was sick and when she was okay. No child should have to learn that kind of survival skill, but Madison did it without complaint. Emma, at 6, still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. She drew pictures of their family, Mom, Madison, and herself, always with big smiles and bright colors. She hung them on the fridge, covering up the past due notices and eviction warnings. Their lives might have continued this way, not good, but survivable, if Jennifer hadn't met Harold Wagner. He was 78 years old, lived alone in a big house on the nice side of town, and had a steady supply of the pills Jennifer craved. The first time Jennifer took the girls to Harold's house, she told them he was a grandfather figure who wanted to help them out. Madison knew better. She'd learned to read the desperation in her mother's eyes. But Emma believed it, at least at first. Harold would give Jennifer pills, and in exchange, she'd leave the girls at his house while she ran errands. Sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Each time, she promised herself it would be the last time. Each time, the need for more pills made her break that promise. The horror of what happened in that house would later come to light through the brave testimonies of Madison and Emma. But for now, let's focus on how this nightmare finally ended. It was Madison who finally broke their silence. After nearly a year of abuse, she confided in her school counselor, Mrs. Peterson. The counselor had noticed changes in Madison, how she'd flinch at loud noises, how she'd stop participating in class, how her once bright eyes had grown dull. One Tuesday afternoon, after everyone else had gone home, Madison stayed behind. With trembling hands and a voice barely above a whisper, she started to tell her story. Mrs. Peterson listened, her heart breaking with each word, but her face remaining calm and supportive. The investigation moved quickly after that. Child Protective Services removed both girls from Jennifer's care within hours of Madison's disclosure. Police arrested Harold Wagner that same night, finding evidence that corroborated the girls' accounts. Jennifer was arrested 2 days later at a local motel. The officers who found her said she was barely coherent, surrounded by empty pill bottles and crying about her girls. In that moment, she wasn't the monster this story might make her seem. She was just a broken woman who'd lost everything to addiction. The trial that followed captured national attention. How could a mother do this to her own children? What kind of person was Harold Wagner, living in his respectable house with his respectable neighbors while committing unthinkable crimes? The evidence was overwhelming. Jennifer pleaded guilty to multiple charges of child endangerment and trafficking. Her addiction was considered during sentencing, but as the judge noted, it explained her actions but didn't excuse them. She received 25 years in prison. Harold Wagner showed no remorse throughout his trial. he sat stone-faced as Madison and Emma testified via closed-circuit television, their young voices steady despite the pain of reliving their trauma. The jury took less than 2 hours to find him guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But what about Madison and Emma? What happens to children after they've lived through something so unimaginable? The girls were placed with their maternal grandmother, the same woman who'd worked 3 jobs to raise Jennifer. She'd moved to a different town by then, rebuilt her life. She gave the girls what they needed most: stability, safety, and unconditional love. Madison, now a teenager, still struggles with the weight of what happened. She deals with anxiety and trust issues, but she's also incredibly resilient. She's an honor student who wants to become a counselor to help other kids who've been through trauma. Emma had to relearn what it means to be a child. She stopped drawing for a while after everything happened, but gradually returned to art as part of her therapy. Her pictures aren't always bright and happy anymore, but they're honest, and sometimes that's more important. The sisters remain incredibly close, their bond strengthened by what they survived together. They still share a room at their grandmother's house, even though there's space for them to have their own. Some nights, they still need to know the other is just an arm's reach away. Their story raises difficult questions about addiction, poverty, and the cycle of abuse. Jennifer grew up in hardship, tried to escape it, but ultimately perpetuated it in the worst possible way. Harold Wagner proved that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they live in nice houses and seem like respected members of the community. But perhaps the most important lesson from this tragedy is about resilience. Madison and Emma survived something no child should ever have to face. They found the courage to speak up, to tell their truth, to reclaim their lives from the darkness that threatened to swallow them. The grandmother says the girls still have nightmares sometimes. They still flinch at unexpected touches. They still struggle with trust and abandonment issues. But they also laugh. They play. They dream about their futures. They refuse to let their past define them. The system that should have protected them failed in many ways. Teachers saw signs but didn't report them. Neighbors heard concerning things but stayed quiet. Social services had received calls about the family but didn't investigate thoroughly enough. This case led to changes in local policies. The school district implemented more rigorous training for teachers about recognizing and reporting signs of abuse. The police department created a specialized unit for crimes against children. Social services revised their investigation protocols. But changes in policy can only do so much. The real change needs to come from us, from society's willingness to see the signs of abuse and act on them, from our commitment to supporting families in crisis before they reach their breaking point, from our determination to protect the most vulnerable among us. Madison and Emma's story is tragic, but it's also a story of survival, of 2 sisters who protected each other when the rest of the world failed them, of a grandmother who stepped up to give them a second chance at childhood, of counselors and therapists who helped them rebuild their sense of safety and trust. Today, Madison and Emma are building new lives. They're in therapy, working through their trauma. They're in school, making friends, trying to be normal teenagers. They're learning that what happened to them doesn't have to determine who they become. Jennifer writes to them sometimes from prison. Madison reads the letters but doesn't respond. Emma keeps them unopened in a box under her bed. Their grandmother says they'll decide what to do with them when they're ready. There's no rushing healing from this kind of betrayal. Harold Wagner died in prison 3 years into his sentence. The girls didn't attend his funeral. They didn't need to. They'd already buried the pain he caused them in therapy sessions and late-night talks and tears shed in each other's arms. This story doesn't have a neat, happy ending. Real life rarely does, but it has something more important: hope. Hope in the resilience of two young girls who refuse to let darkness win. Hope in the power of speaking truth, even when that truth is painful. Hope in the possibility of healing, even from the deepest wounds. The price of addiction isn't measured just in dollars or pills or prison sentences. It's measured in stolen childhoods, in broken trust, in trauma that ripples through generations. But even in the darkest stories, there can be light, if we're brave enough to look for it, strong enough to fight for it, determined enough to create it. Madison and Emma found that light in each other, in their grandmother's love, in their own strength. Their story reminds us that even when everything seems lost, hope can survive. That even in the face of unimaginable betrayal, the human spirit can triumph. Their grandmother says the girls have a saying now, something they whisper to each other when things get hard: together, we're stronger than the dark. Maybe that's the real lesson of this story, that together, as families, as communities, as a society, we can be stronger than the darkness that threatens our children. We can't change what happened to Madison and Emma. We can't erase their trauma or give them back their stolen childhood, but we can learn from their story. We can do better at protecting other children. We can be more vigilant, more willing to speak up, more determined to stop abuse before it starts. And maybe, just maybe, we can help create a world where no other child has to be as brave as Madison and Emma were. A world where children can chase butterflies and dream about their futures without fear. A world where a mother's love isn't for sale at any price. If you see something, say something. Don't look away. Don't stay silent. Be the person who speaks up, who takes action, who makes a difference. Because somewhere, right now, there might be another Madison or Emma waiting for someone to notice, to care, to help. Their story matters. Their voices matter. And so does yours. What's your next video going to be about? Hit subscribe to find out.